Following on from my recent tool videos about my cordless and corded hand power tools, in this video I'm going to be focusing on my larger machines in the workshop. I'm going to be talking about what I like about them, what I dislike about them, and ultimately whether I would recommend buying them or not. I will include links to all of the tools featured in the description box below this video, and they will be affiliate links, so if you click on them and purchase something, then that helps to support this channel. Starting with one of the tools that I use the most, this is the DeWalt DW745 table saw. It's a good quality contractor's saw, which means it's light, it's portable and it's small. But just because it's a contractor's saw doesn't mean that this thing is rubbish. It cuts really accurately. In fact, straight from the box, the fence was perfectly parallel to the blade, and the blade was at a perfect 90-degree angle to the table when the angle adjustment was set to 0. I have made some adjustments just to maintain the accuracy of the saw since I've owned it, because it's been used and abused for almost 3 years now, and that's really easy to do. The fence sits on some adjustment pins which are adjustable via an Allen key. You can also adjust this pointer via a screw which points to the correct angle, although to be honest that's never going to be particularly accurate, and that's why I tend to rely on a digital bevel gauge instead. And you can also adjust the main measurement marker via 2 screws. I've never had any issues with it whatsoever. It's a real workhorse, it's solidly built as you'd expect from the likes of DeWalt. There are a few things that I like and dislike about it though. One of the things I really like about it is the rack and pinion fence system, which you can adjust using this knob, or you can just move it with your hand. And here's a view of it working from underneath. To fit the fence, you just slot it onto these pins and put the flaps down at both the front and the back. And you can see here that there's a second pin which you can attach the fence to if you would like a little bit of extra cutting capacity. And there's a third pair of pins on the left hand side of the table, so that you can flip over the fence and use it there. But I don't recall ever doing that since I've owned the saw. I really like the design of this fence because it fixes both at the front of the saw and the back of the saw. So when the fence is locked in position via this lever, there is no movement or play in the fence whatsoever at the front of the saw or the back of the saw. The dust collection on the saw works reasonably well. Here I've got it hooked up to a 30-litre wet and dry vacuum. The saw doesn't lack any power. I've cut through some really thick slabs of oak with this saw and it's handled it no problem. There is a useful hook built into the fence where you can store a push stick so that it's always at hand. There's also a threaded rod and wing nut on the side of the saw which you can use to attach these adjustment spanners which come with the saw to attach the riving knife and also to change the blade. There's only one thing that I don't like about this saw, and that is how loud it is. Hearing protection is a must with this saw. It really is quite loud. This saw is still available to buy, currently priced at £419 here on Amazon, and I'll include a link in the description box below. I definitely wouldn't hesitate to recommend this saw, providing you don't have any concerns around it being noisy. If noise is an issue for you, I'd probably recommend going for a table saw with an induction motor, but expect to pay a bit more. This is the Axminster white sliding mitre saw, model number 100083. I bought it second hand from a local retiring woodworker. And I've looked this thing up on the internet before, but I've never been able to find out anything about it. Initially I had some issues with the fence that came with the saw, because there wasn't enough adjustment in it to be able to get it at a perfect 90-degree angle to the blade. That's probably not a fault of the saw itself. I'm guessing it probably just took a knock at some point in its life. I've since replaced the stock fence with this aluminium angle fence that runs the length of my mitre station, and ever since then it's been cutting fantastically well. My favourite thing about this saw is that it has an induction motor, so it's extremely quiet. The dust collection isn't particularly good on this, but I think that's a problem with all mitre saws in general. In general, I've been really happy with the saw, and that's probably all I'm going to say on it because this saw is no longer available to buy. But if you do come across one second hand, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it. This is the Record Power BDS 150 belt and disc sander. I've owned this for 1.5 years now, and I bought it from ScrewFix in the UK. I paid £179.99, and I had issues with this thing right from the start. Firstly, it had a tracking problem. You can adjust the tracking here with this knob on the back, but I could not get it to run true. And as a result of that, the belt ended up cutting through a piece of the framework here, which should support this piece on top of the unit. Now, if you ask me, that is not good build quality. A tiny slither of metal supporting this whole piece on top of the main unit, just not good enough. So I had to bodge this. I've glued on a piece of metal here, which is quite thick and chunky, and that supports the top piece and means that the belt can spin around without any issues. The tracking on it is now working correctly, but it still doesn't track as well as my previous benchtop belt sander, which was actually a really cheap model made by Clarke. In terms of what I like about it, the dust collection works reasonably well. There's a port down here on the side, and this is hooked up to another 30-litre shock vac. It's also more powerful than my previous benchtop belt sander, the Clarke. Due to the issue I had with the tracking on the belt sander and the fact that I don't really feel the build quality on the frame is as good as it should be, I would not recommend buying this one. I have heard some positive things about Record Power Tools, but in my experience, just because it's made in the UK doesn't mean it's any good. This is the Charnwood B350 bandsaw, and I bought this new about a year ago from a company called Kendall Tools here in the UK. I've been really pleased with this, and I originally bought this because my previous bandsaw, the ELU EBS 3401, didn't really have enough cutting capacity. This one has a cutting depth of up to 225mm, so it's pretty capable of resawing fairly large boards, and it has a cutting width of 340mm. It has a really good quality cast iron table. The build quality seems excellent, and I expect this bandsaw to be with me for many years to come. The aluminium fence is pretty decent too. You can just line it up with the measurement that you want and lock it down with the handle. And there's no noticeable movement in the fence at the front or even at the back. It has loads of great features such as an LED light, which you can use to illuminate the workpiece. It has a quick release blade tensioning lever, which just makes changing blades so much quicker and easier. There's a built-in holder for the Allen keys and the spanner. There's also a handy dust tray at the bottom. There's a useful slot in the side for storing the mitre gauge, and there's even a useful hook on the side for the push stick. The guide bearings are nice and easy to adjust, and the table tilt mechanism is nice as well. You can use this knob to adjust the angle of the table and just lock it down with this switch. There's really only one negative thing that I've got to say about this saw, and that is the fact that the mitre gauge doesn't fit snugly in the mitre slots of the table. But that seems to be a common thing on pretty much every tool I've ever owned. You can also change the operating speed of the bandsaw by simply moving the drive belt, which is down there. But that's something that I've never done. This bandsaw is still available to buy, and it's currently priced at £625 on Amazon. Link in the description box below. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to recommend this bandsaw. As I say, I've been really happy with it. This is the Electra Beckham HC260M thickness planer and jointer. Currently this is set up in thicknesser mode, and you can adjust the depth of cut by moving the table up and down. Then you can add the outfeed table, and then you add the fence. And in jointer mode, this blade guard can also act as a feather board to keep the board pushed up against the fence. My favourite thing about this tool is how quiet it runs. This thing runs on an induction motor, so it's nice and quiet. You can adjust the height of the infeed table using this knob here, which obviously affects how much material the blades will take off the board. The one thing that I don't like about this tool is that there are two levers to adjust the position and the angle of the fence, and they kind of interfere with each other. You can't really adjust the position of the fence without the lever for the angle adjustment getting in the way. and that always feels a little bit clumsy to me. But to be honest, that's kind of a minor gripe. Aside from that, this machine works fantastically well and I've been really happy with it. This is the Clarke CDP101B drill press table. I bought this second hand from a local woodworker and I think I paid £25 for it, so it was very cheap. The build quality is pretty decent. It's got what I believe to be a solid cast iron table, which is adjustable via this lever at the back. Sometimes I think that maybe it lacks power, because on occasions I'll be drilling something and the resistance will get too much and the motor will stall and it'll make this buzzing noise and it won't finish the job properly. But I've never used or owned any other drill press tables, so I don't really have anything to compare this with. One thing that I do like though is that it runs pretty quietly. And I can't really think of anything else to say about this one, and it's no longer available to buy. It's probably a tool that I will be looking to upgrade at some point, but I don't use the drill press table all that often, so it's not a priority for me right now. This is the Clarke 6-inch bench grinder model CBG6SB. It has a grinding stone on one side and a belt sander on the other, and I don't use it all that frequently, but it has proven to be useful on occasion. On the belt sander side, I have this fitted with a 400 grit belt, and I predominantly use this for putting a clean edge on a Stanley knife blade. I use Stanley knife blades a lot and I never buy new ones. I just tend to reuse them and resharpen them all of the time, and I tend to use them as scrapers to scrape glue and that sort of thing. So it's pretty useful for that at least. I bought this on Amazon for I think about £60, although at the moment it's showing as currently unavailable. This is the Stanley 24 litre air compressor. I'm not going to say too much about this one either, because it's the only air compressor that I've ever owned and ever used. It's very loud, but I think that probably applies to most air compressors. It works absolutely fine for what I use it for, which is predominantly just using with a brad nailer. I do also use the air gun occasionally just for blowing dust off stuff. I've not used it for any other purpose so far. I bought this new from ScrewFix here in the UK, and it's still available for around £100, and it also comes with a 5-piece accessory kit, but I did replace the air hose quite quickly because the one that came with it was rubbish. I did recently see a comment on one of my videos asking me to give my thoughts on this, the Mitre AF505N brad nailer. I've been really happy with it. I think I paid in the region of £100 for it on eBay from new. I've never had a blockage, and even if I did get a blockage, there's this quick release lever in the front which allows you to remove the nail. It's got an adjustment wheel so that you can alter the depth of the brad nails as you fire them in, and that works really well. It's got a built-in tool hook, so you can just hook it on your jeans, useful if you're working up a ladder, and it's nice and quick and easy to install the brad nails. You can even do it with one hand. I do tend to put a drop of oil in this inlet socket fairly regularly just to keep it running smoothly. And the nailer is still available to buy on Amazon, so I'll include a link in the description box below.